June 4, 1944. The Atlantic, 150 nautical miles off the coast of West Africa. On the flag bridge of the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal, a cheap little flat top built on a merchant hull, Captain Daniel Gallery is nearly out of fuel and completely out of patience. For 2 months, his task group has hunted a single German submarine, and Gallery has done something no one in the United States Navy ever ordered him to do. He has trained his men to take one alive. No Navy on Earth boards an enemy warship on the open sea anymore. The last time the American Navy managed it, the year was 1815. This is not a story about a submarine that was sunk. It is a story about a submarine that vanished. A boat does not simply vanish. Somebody has to make it disappear. By the summer of 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic had already turned. The wolf packs that once strangled the convoy lanes were dying now, hunted down by long-range aircraft and by a new kind of American warship. But the U-boat was still the most feared machine in the ocean, and the men who crewed it were among the finest submariners in the world. They were also among the most doomed. Of the roughly 40,000 men who went to sea in the U-boats of Admiral Karl Dönitz, close to 3 in 4 never came home. No branch of any service in the whole war suffered worse. These were not fanatics. They were volunteers and conscripts sent to fight a losing battle in a steel tube, and they fought it with a discipline their enemies respected and feared. They fought it, above all, with a machine called Enigma. Every order, every position, every sailing was enciphered on it, and the German Navy believed, to the bottom of its soul, that the cipher could not be broken. A U-boat that failed to report was simply a U-boat the sea had taken. There was no other explanation, because no other explanation was possible. And when a submarine was cornered, the drill was brutally simple. You did not surrender her. You sent your crew up the ladder, you opened the valves that let the ocean flood the hull, and you let her go down with her secrets. A boat could scuttle herself in minutes. That was the whole point. The Americans understood every piece of this: the machine, the men, the drill. And that understanding created a problem no gun could solve. Because the deepest secret of the Atlantic War was not how to sink a U-boat. It was that the Allies could already read the enemy's mail, and they would sacrifice anything to keep the Germans from finding out. The new kind of American warship was the escort carrier. A flight deck bolted onto a merchant hull. Slow, thin-skinned, and turned out by American yards faster than anyone thought a carrier could be built. The crews had their own name for the type, 3 letters, CVE, that they said stood for combustible, vulnerable, and expendable. Daniel Gallery commanded one of them, and Gallery was no eccentric. He was a naval aviator with a stubborn, practical idea. When his hunter-killer group cornered a U-boat and forced her to the surface, the doctrine, the sane and settled doctrine, was to blow her out of the water. Gallery wanted to do something else. He wanted to send men aboard and take the boat whole. Every reasonable officer knew this was close to madness. A surfaced U-boat could still fight, could still dive, and would scuttle herself before a boarding party ever reached her deck. The Navy trained men to kill submarines, not to capture them. So Gallery trained his own. On his own authority, he drilled boarding parties and salvage crews. Whaleboats ready to launch. Men rehearsed to drop down a hatch into a sinking enemy hull and stop the flooding before she took them down with her. The men who would do it were not the Navy's chosen few. They were citizen sailors, reservists, farm boys, mechanics. The officer who would lead them down the hatch had spent 20 years as an enlisted man before he ever wore an officer's stripes. 2 months earlier, a U-boat had surfaced right in the middle of Gallery's ships before it was destroyed. He had seen with his own eyes that a cornered boat could be caught on the surface. The plan was no fantasy. It only needed one more chance. Of the thousands of American sailors who would soon share the greatest secret of the war, remember that they were ordinary men. A like on this video keeps their story in front of a few more people. It costs nothing. June 4th, 11 in the morning. Gallery's group has been at sea for weeks and the fuel is running low. He gives the order to break off and turn for Casablanca. The hunt is over, and almost the instant he turns away, the destroyer escort Chatelain reports a sound contact. 800 yards off her starboard bow. Something is down there. Below the surface, the German boat has no idea what waits above her. She is a Type 9 submarine, worn and unlucky, running home from a long patrol. Her captain hears the American propellers overhead and takes her deep, the oldest move in the book, the move that has saved 1,000 boats before her. Chatelain wheels in for the kill. Her first attack, a spread of small bombs fired ahead of the ship, misses clean. Overhead, 2 Wildcat fighters from the carrier can see the dark shape of the submarine through the clear water, and they do something strange. They fire their machine guns straight down into the sea, stitching the surface to mark the spot. Follow the tracers. She is right there. Chatelain comes around again and rolls a full pattern of depth charges off her stern. The sea heaves. Under the water, the shock slams into the submarine's hull. Gauges shatter. The rudder jams hard over. The ocean bursts in through the after compartments, and the boat tilts down by the stern, sinking now for real. In the control room, the choice is the one every U-boat captain dreads. Ride her down into the black or take her up into the guns. The German commander blows his tanks. The submarine breaches the surface, water streaming off her casing right in the middle of the American ships. Every gun in the task group opens up at once, and here the plan nearly dies. The German crew pours out of the conning tower and over the side, and as they go, they do exactly what they were trained to do. They leave the engines running so she circles away from the ships. They open the sea valves to let her flood. They set the charges to blow the bottom out of her. By every rule of war, this boat has about 10 minutes to live. She swings in a wide clockwise circle at 7 knots, abandoned, flooding, and rigged to explode, ready to drag the greatest prize of the naval war down with her. Gallery watches from the carrier. The safe choice, the choice no board of inquiry could ever question, is to put a torpedo into her and end it. Sink her and no one dies. He does not sink her. Instead, over the voice radio, comes an order no American captain has given since the age of sail. Away all boarding parties. A whaleboat claws across the swell from the destroyer escort Pillsbury and bangs alongside the circling hull. Leading the party is a lieutenant, junior grade, a former enlisted man from Maryville, Missouri, named Albert David. He looks down at an open hatch on a boat that is flooding beneath him and may blow apart at any second. Here the clock stops. Then David goes down the ladder, and 2 enlisted men go down after him into a dim steel tube tilting toward the bottom of the Atlantic. Seawater is roaring in somewhere in the dark. The German scuttling charges may already be burning. There is no one left aboard but them. They work fast. One man starts tearing the wires off the demolition charges. The others rip through the boat, grabbing everything not bolted down. Charts, signal books, code books by the armful. And fixed to a shelf, an intact Enigma cipher machine still set with the day's keys. A machinist's mate follows them down and finds the thing that is killing the boat. The cover of a sea strainer, knocked open, the ocean pouring through a hole the width of a dinner plate. He wrestles the cover back into place and chokes off the flood. The water stops rising. The boat steadies. And in 10 sacks weighing better than 1,100 pounds, the deepest secrets of the German Navy begin passing up the hatch, hand over hand, into the daylight. When it is over, 1 German sailor is dead, killed in the fight on deck. 58 of his crewmates are prisoners. And not 1 American has been lost. The submarine does not go to the bottom. She rides low and ugly under an American flag, and Gallery's men begin the long, secret work of towing an enemy boat 1,700 miles across the ocean. A boat does not simply vanish. If your father or your grandfather served in the Atlantic, in the escort carriers, in the destroyer escorts, or in the boats, put his name, his ship, and his hometown in the comments. That is how the memory survives. How does a Navy pull a stunt like this off, and why could no one else? Start with the ship. The United States was building escort carriers on an assembly line, dozens of them. Cheap hulls turned out faster than the enemy could sink them. Those carriers let America do what Germany never could. They put air power over the empty middle of the ocean, far beyond the reach of any land-based plane, and they turned the hunt for submarines into a science. Behind the ship stood something the enemy could not see at all: a vast intelligence machine ashore. Direction-finding stations that fixed a boat's position the instant she keyed her radio, and a tracking room in Washington that followed the wolf packs like pieces on a board. Gallery did not stumble onto that submarine. He was steered to her. And then there was the drill. The reason David's men could go down that hatch and stop the flooding is that Gallery had made them rehearse it 100 times, on his own initiative, when the whole doctrine of the Navy said it could not be done. The system worked because one stubborn man built it in advance. Now set the number down and look at it plainly. 129 years. That is how long it had been since an American warship boarded and captured an enemy man of war on the open sea. The last time, the War of 1812, was barely over, and Gallery's crew had just done it in 16 minutes without losing a single American life. Germany had none of this. No fleet of throwaway carriers. No way to reach into the mid-ocean and hold it. Their submarines fought alone, and when one failed to come home, there was no machine to tell them why. Here is the part the title promised, the part where the enemy works out what happened to him. Except that with this boat, the enemy never worked it out at all. The German Navy recorded her the way it recorded hundreds of other missing submarines. Overdue, presumed lost. Somewhere off West Africa, one more boat had gone down with all hands, and the sea does not give reasons. They mourned her crew. They wrote the families. They did not change a single setting on the Enigma machine because it never crossed their minds that they had to. And that was the whole terrifying point. Because the Allies had not needed to capture this submarine to read Enigma. They had already broken it more than a year before and were reading the U-boat traffic almost as fast as the Germans themselves. That is the honest limit of this story, and it is the key to everything else. The capture did not crack the German cipher. It threatened to reveal that the cipher was already cracked. If the Germans ever suspected a boat had been taken whole, code books and all, they would change everything, and the Allies would go blind 2 days before the invasion of France. The men at the very top understood that instantly. In London, the First Sea Lord fired off a cable to Admiral Ernest King the same day, begging that the capture be buried completely. And King, the most powerful officer in the United States Navy, looked at the finest catch of the war and did not see a triumph. He saw a security disaster with Daniel Gallery's name on it. So how does one of Dönitz's U-boats simply vanish off the coast of Africa? It does not. It is boarded, emptied, and towed away, and then it is buried under an oath of silence. Daniel Gallery was not decorated for the greatest capture in modern naval history. He was threatened with a court-martial. He was ordered to make the story disappear. And the hundreds of sailors who had just lived the finest sea story of their lives were sworn to secrecy, and they kept it, every one of them, until the war was won. The historians have never agreed on him. To Samuel Eliot Morison, the Navy's own great chronicler, it was valor in the finest tradition of the service. To Clay Blair, the historian who knew the U-boat war better than anyone, it was an act of lunacy that came within a whisker of throwing away the codebreaker's entire war. Both cases are strong. Decide for yourself. The cost of it was one German sailor, dead on a wet deck. No Americans. 129 years of naval history settled in 16 minutes, and no one was allowed to say so. The man who led the party down the hatch was Lieutenant Albert David of Maryville, Missouri. Within the year, he was dead of a heart attack before the medal ever reached his hands. It was the only Medal of Honor awarded to the entire Atlantic Fleet in the whole of the war. Somewhere off West Africa, a submarine failed to come home, and a grieving Navy wrote her down as lost at sea. She was not lost. She had been taken, whole, by a cheap little carrier and a boarding party of ordinary Americans, and hidden so well that her own commanders never knew. A boat does not simply vanish. This one was made to. Subscribe, and I will find you another crew the record was never supposed to remember.